Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, episode 116.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of Azul Summer Pavilion, Dizzle, and Carcassonne Hunters and Gatherers. We've got a 6-pack review of the Taverns of Tiefenthal, which we're putting on tap, and we have a hop primer on Strata hops. In our final round, we asked our Slack channel what their convention must-haves were. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. You're there. All is for the best in the best of our world.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is a podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
Finally back in the Carcazone!
I mean, I suppose they need beer in the Carcazone as well.
I guess that just occurred to me. That's probably a really weird random pull for people that tuned in the last few months. But we'll get to that when we get to our games that we talk about later in the episode.
Do the tigers drink the beer?
No.
It's to wash down the deer.
To wash down the deer. This is off the rails
already.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Draft Mechanic. If this is your first time tuning into an episode of Draft Mechanic, sorry. That was really confusing, but you can find us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or at Draft Mechanic on all your favorite social medias, as long as those are Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.
Well, we also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up for this episode, as there is for every episode, and you can let us know if we're saying something and you have an opinion on it. That is the place to do it. Also, you can answer the final round there as well as in our Slack.
Opine away in that internet location. Yes, by the way, we every now and then I remember to mention this. Draft Mechanic is a member of Punchboard Media, where we all bring something to the table. I highly encourage you to visit punchboardmedia.com and check out all the other great content creators, audio, video, written, Instagram, pictures, photographs. Eric Yurko's pictures are great.
Also, Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted.
A little bit of a programming note at the beginning of this episode. I kind of just feel like we're going to do this midweek episode thing for a while. It's nice to have an entire weekend, especially when we spent the last 2 consecutive weekends at board game conventions.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So, yeah, we're going to do that. And, of course, you know, if anything is ever off of the normal schedule, I'll talk about it on Twitter just so you all know what's up. But here at the top of the episode, I do also want to give a big thanks to people who have picked up the Board Game Geek micro badge for Draft Mechanic. In this episode, we have Paul Imboden has picked up the Draft Mechanic micro badge.
Which was an absolute shock to me when I went and copied it into the notes. I was like, Paul Imboden is here all the time. He's always answering our final rounds with cool things. We said his name wrong for like a year and a half. But now we know it's Imboden, and he has our micro badge.
Yeah.
So everything is complete.
And if you would like that Draft Mechanic micro badge, you can obviously go by our guild 2470, find the thread that says we've got Geek Gold for you or something like that, or badge or whatever, and just be like, yo, give us Geek Gold, or give yourself Geek Gold, or we'll give you Geek Gold. Geek Gold will flow in whatever direction it needs to if it means that you get a Draft Mechanic micro badge.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do twice monthly gaming meetups. The first one is going to be on the first Thursday of every month. That means the day this is dropping, so 2/6. If you are not going to be able to make that, we do one on the third Tuesday of every month. That is going to be at Slud Cerveceria every single month. This month on February 18th.
Mm-hmm.
So we would love to see you there. Both of those locations have delicious beverages of the alcoholic and non-alcoholic kind.
Mm-hmm.
Salud's got food. Good Road has an order-in type of food situation. And they both have good spots for playing a fun whole boatload of games.
Yeah, if you don't drink and you still want to come out to a meetup, don't worry. You can totally do that because there's plenty of beverages. Obviously, Good Road has a lot of ciders and some good stuff like that, and also non-alcoholic
ciders are still drinking. Yeah.
But Salute has a full coffee shop, and I've actually taken up going there in the morning when I need to do like paperwork and stuff, i.e. eat breakfast and drink coffee, and then work all the way through till board game day. I have literally eaten all of my meals at Salute Cerveceria, and maybe you should too.
Probably not.
Probably don't, but yeah. Hey, as we are at the top of the episode, I would like to come back and talk about Kickstarters, because this is generally where we talk about Kickstarters.
But fewer of them now.
Fewer of them now, but I do want to say a note. We did have somebody mention on Twitter that they actually really look forward to the Kickstarter segment. So we are going to continue having this. I'm just going to make sure that I keep it focused and not rambly.
Yeah, we got
And-
to a point about 6 months ago where we were doing like 5 updates and 3 new Kickstarters, and it ended up being about a 45-minute Kickstarter segment, which is restrictive because then we still talk about all the stuff we plan to talk about, and we end up with like a 2-hour-long episode, which is pushing where we want to be.
Yes, and we will continue to talk about Kickstarters, of course, if we play them and preview them, because they are coming as well. And we do actually have a number of previews we'll be talking about in the near future. But not
first,
this episode. Danielle, tell us an update.
The update is for Oath Chronicles of Empire and Exile, which is the Kickstarter that we talked about last episode from Leader Games. That has completed its campaign and funded with $1,117,132 of its $50,000 goal. It had 13,349 backers.
Holy moly.
So they're going to make that one.
Yeah, you think so? Hey, good job, Leader Games. Y'all deserve 1 to 300 naps. Not consecutive, but like when you need them. Take a nap. Hey, just go take a nap. Take a nap right now.
First, maybe make Oath.
And in new projects, I have 2 things that I want to point out. First off, the rival networks from our friends over at Formal Ferret Games is currently funding. It just crossed the $30,000 line of its $20,000 goal with 841 backers. This one ends on February 14th, 2020, with an estimated delivery by the end of the year, December of this year, and you can back it for $25. It gets you the game and the stretch goals. And I do know that the stretch goals just included the executives expansion that Gil has designed for that, so I'm excited about that. Danielle, you got a chance to play this, or at least take a look at it back at PAX Unplugged, right?
Well, yeah, before I get into that, I do want to say there were some higher pledge levels that I didn't include in this little write-up because they're all already gone. So if you would like this game, you can get the game and the stretch goals. And if you'd like multiple copies of this game because you're a retailer, that was the other pledge option. But yeah, I got a chance to play this at PAX Unplugged. Gil had a very prototype level quality, and I got to play with Eric Buscemi from the Cardboard Horde, and it is a really nice implementation of the networks as a 2-player game, because making it a 2-player game makes it inherently head-to-head instead of just trying to do your very best. He made some tweaks where instead of being able to place only a certain number of stars on a show, you can add as many stars as you need, but you're only adding 1 star per turn. You're trying to get the most out of every particular scoring iteration instead of just trying to amass the most viewers. And then when you kick things off of your show, they don't necessarily age the way they did in the networks, but when you take them out of the show, you have to start again from scratch and build everything back up. But the shows and stars that come out later are, the shows certainly are going to be better than the ones that come out earlier.
Ooh.
So you want to replace your early shows because they're just going to inherently have a lower baseline, but you want to make sure that when you do that, you have a plan for getting those shows really geared up, because you're going to need them geared up by the time scoring comes. It was a super fun game. I liked it, and not just because I beat Eric.
I trust Gil's game design just brain, and I'm super excited to see this. I was kind of bummed that I didn't get a chance to play it at PAX Unplugged, but
Maybe you shouldn't have demoed so much.
Maybe I shouldn't have demoed so much, but I did, and instead, we will be able to hopefully play it by the end of the year.
Also, $25 is a really good price point for this game. It is a 2-player game, but you're not talking about just like a card game. Well, I mean, it is largely card, but it has the other components like networks did as well. It's not a chintzy game, and I think it was surprisingly low for a price point when I went and looked it up. I expected this to be like a $30, $35 game, and $25 for the stretch goals and the whole game. I like it.
Dang, I like it. Check it out. The Rival Networks on Kickstarter until Valentine's Day. Up next, I have not a project, but a collection of projects, because this is interesting. It piqued my interest, and I've decided y'all need to hear me talk about it. And I'm going to talk about a collection of games called Zine Quest 2. This is an initiative on Kickstarter right now of a just completely diverse set of people that are making RPG zine projects on Kickstarter, and they're going to be, I guess, going over the next 6 to 10 days. I think the window is that they're supposed to be no more than 2-week-long projects. But why I noticed this, our friend Travis Hill over at Presspot Games, we talked about Chainmail recently, and then about this time last year, Reunification was a little RPG zine that he did for Zine Quest 1, but he has a project called The Wait, which is an RPG about waiting for the inevitable. It is a 3 to 6 player one-shot RPG exploring waiting for the inevitable passing of a family member, which is incredibly heavy. But
Yeah, nice light topic there.
yeah, but I love seeing the kind of stuff that Travis works into. And then I asked him about Zine Quest. What is Zine Quest? And Zine Quest is just a whole bunch of people that are doing these lo-fi zine RPG and RPG related projects on Kickstarter right now. And there's a few dozen of them if you take the time to look around. And we'll put a link in the show notes with the tag that you can go and kind of browse all of the different Zine Quest stuff, so you can take a look at some cheap and, easy RPG things that you can, back on Kickstarter and try out in your own group.
It seems like Kickstarter had sort of gotten behind grouping this all together as well in their page. So there is a Zine Quest 2 page that you can go to, correct?
Yeah, there's a landing page explaining what it is, which is the kind of stuff that I just told you. There are all these lo-fi, one-color printing, either stapled or bound, 8.5 by 11 kind of zines. And there's also a tag that we'll put in the show notes that is a link to everything that is tagged with that particular kind of project. So please go check out The Wait from Travis Hill over at Presspot Games if that is interesting to you. And also just check out Zine Quest 2 in general. We will have the links in the show notes, and you can find the zine that is right for you. Yeah. Kickstarters.
We're done with them.
We're done with them. It's always weird to be done this quickly. But
Okay.
time for you to have a cat on you, which means we need to take a quick break and go to some bump music.
Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draft mechanic for t-shirts.
All right, now that the live studio cat has settled into his position, Danielle, we're going to talk about some game. I'm sorry, I've got cat brain. I can see him from here. He's so dang cute. Good
You've
old live
got
studio
cat
cat.
brain.
Yes. Danielle, do you think you can overcome cat brain for a few minutes to tell us about Azul Summer Pavilion, the 2019 release from Next Move game that plays 2 to 4 players in 30 to 45 minutes, designed by Michael Kiesling with art by Chris Quilliams, the game that is set collection, pattern building, and a tower for some reason?
Sure. Azul Summer Pavilion is the third installment in the Azul currently trilogy.
Azulogy.
Who knows if it will stay a trilogy? I
They
assume
do.
not. But I have no reason to think that other than the fact that Next Move likes to print money.
There's other shapes in the world.
In Azul Summer Pavilion, you are going to be doing a lot of the same things you do in base Azul. You will have some Bakelite style tiles, and they will be out on some coasters in the middle of the board. How many you have of them is going to depend on how many players, but they're each going to have 4 tiles on them. When it is your turn, you can either take all of the tiles of a single color from one of the coasters, or take all of the tiles of a single color from the center of the ring of coasters. The difference in Azul Summer Pavilion is that there is a wild color every round. This was not the case in the first 2 Azul games, but in the third game, in Azul Summer Pavilion, every round there will be a color that if you take all of the tiles of a certain color from a coaster, say the coaster's got red, yellow, blue, and yellow is the wild color. If I take those 2 red tiles, I also get to take only 1 tile of the wild color, and I have to take it. I'm going to take all these tiles and they're going to go into my pool that I will use to place onto my board at the end of the round. That's another thing that's a little bit different than base Azul. Normally you'd be placing your tiles as soon as you place them onto your Azul board to sort of state your board state, and then that will affect how you take things. In Azul Summer Pavilion, you're going to be drawing all of your tiles and setting them aside, and you're not going to place them on your board until you have cleared the entire tile pool. You're going to keep pulling tiles from either the coasters or the center until all the tiles are gone. Once any tiles are taken from a coaster, the remaining tiles will be pushed into the center, so that's how you're going to get more tiles in the center. And then once all the tiles have been taken, everybody is going to look at what they have, taking into account whatever color is wild that round, and they're going to place them out onto their board, which is made up of a bunch of stars, because the tiles in this game are sort of oblong triangles. They're diamond shaped. I don't know why I said oblong triangle shapes, because that's not even accurate.
Yeah, they're rhombuses.
They're diamonds.
Yeah. Diamonds are rhombuses.
The way placement of tiles works in this game is sort of similar to base Azul. Each of the sections of each of the stars on your player board, and there is a star for each color on your player board, is numbered 1 to 6. In order to be able to place a tile in the one section of a specific color, you need to discard, or you need to have at least 1 tile, meaning you can't just place a wild on the one space of a color that is not the wild color. In order to place a tile on the 2 space, you need to have one tile of that color to place onto your board and an additional one to discard into the completely irrelevant cardboard tower that they've given you for discards.
It's so relevant. You got to throw these tiles somewhere.
Is a box lid not good enough for you?
We'll come back to that later.
Okay, so you put it in the tower, and you place one onto your board. All the way up to 6, where in order to place on that 6, you need to have 1 to place onto the board and 5 to discard. How you divide up the tiles that you've taken that turn therefore becomes a little bit of a puzzle. How can I maximize my placements and have enough tiles to discard, but also place tiles in the spots that I want? And the reason that spots are important is at the end of the game, you're going to get extra points for having all of your 1s covered, all of your 2s covered, all of your 3s covered, and all of your 4s covered. You're also going to get points throughout the game whenever you place tiles onto the 4 locations that surround some features which are placed out onto your board. For instance, there are statues between a lot of the colored stars. Anytime you place on the 2 prongs that are reaching out around the statues on the 2 adjoining stars, you're going to be able to place an extra tile from this center board, which you know what the tiles are that you can pull from, and you can sort of plan. You can maybe take a wild tile, or maybe take something that you need one more tile to be able to discard to make another placement. You can repeat that as many times as you fill in the spaces around features on the board, and there are 3 different kinds of features. One gives you 1 additional tile, one gives you 2, and one gives you 3 additional tiles. You're also going to get some extra points at the end of the game for having completed a full star of a color, so depending on which star you complete, because there are different numbers of tiles for each color in the bag, you will get more or fewer points. If it is a particularly plentiful tile, you'll get fewer points. If it's a harder to complete tile, you'll get more points. Once you have completed all the rounds on your round tracker, meaning that all of the colors have become wild at one point during the game, you are going to tally up everybody's score, give those points that I've stated before, and whoever has earned the most tile points from their fancy stars is the winner of Azul Summer Pavilion.
They are the most pavilionist.
They have thrown a lot of stuff into a useless cardboard tower.
I got it. They're pavillionaires.
They are.
Yes. Okay.
Nice.
First, I want to get out of the way. One of the most infuriating things about the original Azul is you kept throwing all the pieces into the box lid, and then you try to pour them back into the bag, but they're squares, so they end up spilling all over the place. That was annoying. That's why I like the tower. Because you put all the pieces in the tower, and then the tower just pours right into the bag. It's very good.
Right, but the tower doesn't fold down, so the box had to have a space for this 3-dimensional hollow tower.
Yes.
Which was kind of annoying.
But it made them the same size as all the other boxes.
And the tiles aren't square anymore, so you wouldn't have had that problem anyway.
Look, there's been a lot of mistakes, but there's a cool tower that you get to stand on the table.
There is, and I guess it's kind of fun to drop things into the tower because they do make that satisfying click noise, but I still think it's a waste of box space.
Yeah. Well, yes, you're right. This is my second favorite Azul, which I think is easy to say. I'm starting to wonder if on repeated plays I would like this more than base Azul, because I thought there was a lot of really interesting interplay in the way you have to choose, and that you have got the wild that allows you to kind of manipulate the placements you're going to do, and then also the placements that you're going to do are going to manipulate you getting bonuses, and I really like getting bonuses when I'm doing a tile laying game. We'll get to that in 2 games from here, but I think that that's a really neat addition, and that's something that base Azul never had. Base Azul was never about getting bonuses for having really good tile placement. You just got slightly more points for having stuff in lines.
Well, because in base Azul, you don't necessarily want more tiles. Mm-hmm. You can't place things if their row doesn't have space for them in base Azul. So, like, if you've got 2 empty spaces in your red row and you get 3 additional tiles, that would actually be really bad and lose you points.
Yeah.
Whereas in this game, you don't necessarily need to place all of your tiles from round to round. You are able to save 4 tiles to the next round if you want to. And since you don't know exactly what you're going to be working towards at the very beginning of the round, because you do have those extra wild tiles that you may or may not be getting, I think it lends itself to working with bonus tiles a little bit more, because at the end you are sort of seeing how you can make your entire round's worth of pulls work best for you, as opposed to just making one tactical move and then hoping to make another tactical move. You're having a whole strategy for everything you've done that round.
I also felt like I was a lot more productive in this particular incarnation of Azul. Because
you can like chant at it if you want.
Azul. No, I can't do it. So if you think about it, there's 42 total placements that you could do on the Summer Pavilion board. You have 6 sections of 6, and then you have that center zone as well, which is kind of just like your garbage place where you put extra stuff. And in base Azul, you have a maximum number of 25 tiles you can place if you inexplicably ended everything on the final round. But like realistically, you're going to place maybe 15 or so tiles. And I just feel like I did a lot more in Summer Pavilion in a similar number of rounds. It's a fixed 6 rounds, and I feel like base Azul was somewhere in that 4 to 7 rounds kind of space. But I feel like I was doing more, and I think a lot of that comes down to getting bonuses and getting the ability to do a whole bunch of manipulation of my tiles, and I really had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I could see that this is a little bit more in depth than base Azul as well, because a lot of the times when you're looking at the board state, because you can only ever take one additional wild colored tile when you're taking stuff off the board, and you can never take all of the color which is currently wild, unless there's only one, which I assume you could do that. But you can't just take all the red if red is wild, even though you could do that on any other round. So there were definitely rounds of the game where I was like, well, if I do this, I can do that. And then I realized after I devised the strategy that I can't have taken the thing that I predicated the whole strategy on because it's the wild color this round. Yeah. So I think it makes you pay a little bit more attention and think about what you're going to do a little bit better. And also you have to be aware of the tiles which are in that bonus section. Because there are 12 bonus tiles at every time, you can see like, okay, well, I have 2 of the yellow, and I'm going to be able to get a bonus draw for 2 additional. And okay, maybe there's one other yellow that's up in that bonus section. I don't necessarily need to focus on getting a yellow tile from my draws. I'm going to be able to get that later, unless you're also going to take it. So I look at your board and see, do you maybe want a yellow bonus draw? Okay, you don't really need a yellow bonus draw, so I don't need to worry about it when I'm pulling tiles from the center. And that gives me something that I don't need to worry about, which is really nice. I think this is both more in-depth, and also it gives you a moment of relief that you don't necessarily get with the other versions of Azul, when you're like, okay, I don't need to worry about this because I'll be able to draw it from the center.
More strategy, more flexibility. And I also, another thing I don't know if we mentioned yet, you have the opportunity to save up to 3 tiles between rounds.
I did, yeah. It's 4. But...
Right. It was a really fun thing to play with, because if I knew I had 2 yellows that I didn't really want to place on yellow 2, I can save them if the yellow is the next wild color. It was really, really helpful to be able to do that.
Yeah, especially since a lot of the rounds in our game, the wild color didn't come out at all, which is, it's entirely possible that happens. But if you have them saved from the last round, you can still use them as wild tiles. They don't just revert to being yellow because you saved them from the last round.
Yeah. All in all, Azul Summer Pavilion, super thumbs up. Really glad that they have another strong Azul, which will probably trick me into buying the 4th Azul. But then the 5th one will be good again, right?
Maybe.
That's how this works?
I didn't like Stained Glass of Sintra, and I was really not excited when I saw that you had bought Summer Pavilion. I was like, we already have Azul. We like Azul. We don't need more Azul.
We have Azul at home.
But I think this is better than Stained Glass of Sintra by far, at least for me.
Easily.
And I can see it coming out as much as our base Azul in our group. If somebody's playing base Azul, I can see another table pulling Summer Pavilion out and playing that instead.
Well, we will find out later today when we take it to Good Road Cider Works. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Danielle, let's get randowriter.
Sure. We are going to be talking about Dizzle, a 2019 release from Schmidt, Spiele, and Stronghold Games, which plays 1 to 4 players in 30 minutes. The designer is Ralf Zurlind, and the artist is Anne Potzke. This is a game of rolling, writing, and getting to that bomb first.
You got to get to that bomb.
You know, a common randowriter technique.
So Dizzle is a randowriter in that kind of stronghold box size in the Ganshan Clever and Nakmal size box that he has. Stephen Bonacore has like a dozen of them now, I think. They're just kind of springing up out of every possible corner.
Well, I mean, Schmidt Spiele has a dozen of them, and then they just make their way across the sea.
So Dizzle is a randowriter. You have your standard sheet of paper. You're going to roll some dice, and you're going to be checking off boxes on your sheet. One thing I would like to say up front, there are 4 different levels of the sheet. We're only going to really talk about base level, maybe level 2, but as you go up from levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, it adds on some more special boxes that'll give you more special powers that I'll leave you to discover on your own. But at the base level, level 1 of Dizzle, you have your sheet of paper in front of you, and it has a set of squares, and each of the squares has some pips in it. It's kind of just like it's not really like a perfect grid because, you have like some outcroppings here and there around the shape, but basically squares that are all next to each other orthogonally. And you're going to start in the center of this thing because in the center of it, there are some boxes that are already marked off.
So convenient.
Hey, you got to start somewhere. And in this particular game of random writing, you're going to start where the X's are. So the start player each round is going to roll a certain number of dice. I think it's like 3n+1 dice, and they're all 1 through 6 dice, and the start player is going to select one of their dice that has the number of pips that is one of the spaces adjoining the things that are already X'd off on their sheet. So in the very beginning, just around that very center area, they're going to take that die and kind of just place it on top of the sheet. They're not going to mark anything yet, and every player is going to have an opportunity to take dice and round robin. So like the first player will end up taking an extra die compared to everybody else that round. Placement is, if you're going to put a die in your sheet, it has to go next to a die you've already placed. The first die has to go next to something you've already marked off. And then if you back yourself into a corner or stuff, there's some rules about how you're allowed to jump around the sheet or restart again, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. If it's your turn to draw a die and you cannot take one of the dice that are out there, you have the opportunity to either pass for the round or re-roll the rest of the dice. If you roll the dice and something comes up that you can use adjoining to dice you already have, good for you. You get to have that. If it doesn't, if you get a totally bad roll and you can't use any of them, you have to put one of the dice from your sheet back into the center. You're allowed to continue going if you want, but you've already lost one die, so who knows how many more dice you're going to lose.
Or maybe somebody else will roll it and there'll be a new thing.
Entirely possible. But once you've passed out on a round, you've passed out, and once everybody has passed, you're going to lift the dice off of your sheet, you're going to mark off the ones that you had a die on, and you're going to continue on with the next round. Some of the squares on your sheet are going to have interesting bonuses. You have the bombs that Danielle alluded to earlier that everybody's going to kind of race for, because once you reach one of the bombs, everybody else has to scribble out that bomb on their sheet. Basically, you blow up everybody else's bomb, which will cause those players to have a -2 at the end of the round. There's also some gems on some of the squares that will earn you extra points. And then additionally, if you're able to complete full rows or full columns of some of the rows or columns, you will get a bunch of extra points. Dizzle is played in a fixed number of rounds depending on player count. So you're going to just look at your sheet and do whatever that number of rounds is. And then at the end of it, you're going to count up all your points. And if you did a good job, you're going to have the most points. And if you did a bad job, you're going to have the least points. But that's kind of how this is going to work. As you progress into the higher levels, it unlocks things like keys you have to get at to be able to cross off other boxes. There's puzzle pieces where you need to have several of them together. There's a rocket, which allows you to then launch off onto a planet on a different section of the sheet, which is weird because some of the sheets are split up into different gridded areas that don't physically connect to each other. And I'll just let you look at the pictures online because this is not the kind of thing I can super describe in an audio medium. But yes, Danielle, Random Writers, Dizzle, how did you feel?
I expected to dislike this quite a bit.
And did you?
No, it was actually pretty fun.
Okay.
Since Ganz schön clever, a lot of these random writers haven't been exactly my cup of tea. I know Bricks wasn't really quite for me, and Doppelt so clever was okay. It wasn't as good as Ganz schön. So I went into it, I was like, okay, it looks pretty basic. I don't think this is going to be as fun as, Ganz schön clever was, or something else that we could play in maybe half an hour. Because for Random Writer, half an hour is sort of pushing the amount of time I want to spend on it. But we played through it, and then we immediately played it again. It was a really fun time. That aspect of racing to complete the bombs, or hate drafting to make sure that the 1-5 that is going to let the player next to you complete a bomb and not anybody else, because if there's only 1-5, everybody's got the same numbers on each of their squares, so that bomb is 5 for everybody. And if there's only 1-5, even if I can't get to the bomb, I want to make sure you don't get it, because if I can't complete it the same round, I'm going to get -2 points. So there is a little bit of interaction between players, which is nice. I think it's one of the things people liked about Ganz schön clever. But it's not like the end-all be-all of the game, because there are 4 bombs, and you can go, if you can't get to one, you can go off and try to get to another. There are gems that are going to get you points. There are rows and columns that are going to get you way more points than you would lose for a bomb. So there's always something to do, and there's always that aspect of chance when you can't place a die. Do I re-roll and hopefully get something I need that'll maybe put me just a little bit closer to the thing that'll mean I can complete it next round? Or do I not do that because if I screw up, well, I mean, not screw up, but if I roll poorly, which I do a lot, I might lose some of the progress that I've made, and then I'm going to have to redo that over again next round. And it's not only going to waste one of my pulls, but it's going to mean it's going to take me longer to get to those things I'm racing to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that interactivity of the race, which is something we don't have in a lot of randowriters, and I feel like this one did it well. I'm really interested to see how that works as you progress through those higher levels. And apparently over in Germany, there's already a level 5 through 8 of Dizzle, so hopefully we'll be seeing those stateside at some point. I do know that Stephen Bonacore likes to do an expansion here and there, so hopefully we get to see them. But I really was surprised how much I enjoyed it as well. I'm interested to play this one solo. Like, I think with a lot of randowriters, I would really hope that somebody does an app version of this solo.
Now, how would the race work solo?
It's turns and points based.
Oh.
Yeah, so you have to get a certain number of turns and points.
See, I think I'd rather play this with other people. I've been a vocal component of the Gauntlet and Clever app, which I don't want to play Gauntlet and Clever with other people. I want to play it by myself. But I think with Dizzle, since that race element was what made it fun, I think I'd like to play that with other people instead of as an app.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I also really want to play those higher levels because I want to understand why this randowriter has rockets and planets.
Everything can have rockets. You love space.
I do love space. Yes, space, the randowriter. Finally, we've made it. So yeah, Dizzle, good, cheap randowriter box. I think it's worth time if you enjoy randowriters. I definitely had fun with it, and it sounds like you did too.
I did.
All right, Danielle, guess what? Guess what? It's time. Time to go in the Carcazone.
Time to go where?
Time to go into the Carcazone.
Where?
Into the Carcazone!
Oh, why didn't you just say so?
Well, because I was waiting for you to goad me into it appropriately, but instead you just stared at me in silence.
Yeah, because I thought you knew.
Oh, I knew. Oh, yes.
If you are fairly new around here, we have been on a several year long at this point quest to review every Carcassonne game ever, and we've almost done it.
This is it asterisk.
This is not it.
This is it-ish. This is it-ish.
But we have talked about every other standalone Carcassonne game and all of the major expansions, with one exception, I believe.
No, we've done all the major expansions.
We didn't do Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune is a standalone, expandalone. It's a thing. It's out there. Oh, look, listeners, promise I will find the Wheel of Fortune someday, and I will spin it for you, dear listeners, and we'll tell you about the Carcazone. But it's out there somewhere. Big wheel keeps on turning.
Not Wheel of Fortune? You didn't go for the song Wheel of Fortune?
Is there a song?
It's an Ace of Base song.
I'm just used to hearing Pat Sajak. Something. Hey everybody, Carcassonne Hunters and Gatherers. It's a 2002 standalone Carcassonne game published by Z-Man Games and also Rio Grande Games. It plays 2 to 5 players in 35-ish minutes. This is designed by our boy Klaus-Jürgen Werder with art by Chris Quilliams and Johann Rutinger. This is a game of area majority, tile placement, and satiated tigers. Oh my.
I didn't realize how weird that sounded when I wrote it down, but them tigers are not hungry any longer.
Yeah. Danielle, how do you play Carcassonne?
Like every Carcassonne game. I think almost every Carcassonne game.
The dice game we will never speak of again.
I meant the card game. But Carcassonne Hunters and Gatherers is a tile laying game where you're going to be placing tiles out onto the already established tableau of tiles, trying to complete features and claim features for points. When a feature that your meeple is on is completed, you will accrue the points for that feature. Depending on what it is, you will get a different number of points. At the end of the game, the person who has earned the most points from their meeples is the winner of a Carcassonne game.
Yes. What's special about Hunters and Gatherers, though?
In Hunters and Gatherers, they take your standard types of features, which are usually a city, a road, a farm, and a monastery, I think. They completely write off the monastery. There are no monasteries. They replace it with a different mechanic that we'll get to in a little bit.
Ooh.
The roads become rivers, and they work pretty much the same. The river portion of it. You place your meeple on a started river. When the river completes, you get 1 point per river tile. The difference being in Hunters and Gatherers, there are going to be fish in the ending ponds of each river, and you will get additional points for those fish.
Fish points.
Yes. The cities are replaced with forests, and you're, like normal, going to get 2 points per every tile which has a forest portion of the completed forest when it is completed. If The forest that is completed has a gold nugget on one of the tiles. The person who completes it, not the person who scores it, will be able to place a fancy bonus gold nugget tile, and these have sort of one-off features that do not follow your normal rules.
Bonus moves. I love bonus moves.
I know you do. We talked about it earlier.
Yeah. That
So
was
it
foreshadowing.
It may be something like a mushroom that when you place it into a forest gives you an extra 2 points. It essentially works like a banner in a regular Carcassonne city. It may be a
brush fire.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say burning copse of trees. But that will scare away all of the tigers in a zone. And tigers are going to be not great for you. So we'll get to that in a minute.
They hungry.
It may be just a cool special animal that is not a normal animal. They're just fine animals. They give you some more points.
They're aurochs.
Okay.
It may be a lake full of fish.
It may be a lake full of fish. It's going to be a cool tile. You're going to want to place it.
Bonus tiles.
So it encourages you to finish off other people's features.
Yes.
The way that farmers work, in original Carcassonne, you lay a farmer into a field. It will stay there till the end of the game. Farmers in this game work the same way. They're hunters. They're not farmers. Sorry. They work the same way. You lay them down, they stay there till the end of the game. And they are going to score the field that they are laying in. This is, again, the same as regular Carcassonne. Except what they're scoring is different. There will be animals on your field tiles that you're placing throughout the game. Some of them will be deer. They look like deer. They're fine. They're worth 2 points. Mm-hmm. Some of them will be tigers. The tigers will eat the deer.
Yes, 1-to-1. 1-to-1 eating of deer.
Tigers themselves, not great to have, because then any deer that you put in that were lower than your value of tigers are going to be worth nothing. Mm-hmm. There are also rhinos. Rhinos don't get eaten at all. Rhinos don't interact with tigers. They just exist. They work kind of like the muskoxes. Sorry, oryx. You're going to lay your hunter into the field, and as long as you are the only hunter in that field at the end of the game, or the majority hunter in that field at the end of the game, you will get points for all of the animals that are not eaten by the other animals at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about huts. What do the huts do?
Huts are the thing that replaced monasteries in this game. They're not identical to them, but they replaced that mechanic because we don't have monasteries, because I guess the tigers aren't going to monasteries? Makes sense. The way huts work are you place them onto a river system that is on the tiles when you add to that river system, as long as there are no huts already in it. At the end of the game, you're going to get 1 point per fish in any of the lakes attached to that river system. So it's going to give you something to throw all of the random, what would have been road tiles but are now river tiles into as you get them. Now, as with everything else in Carcassonne, you can connect up to somebody else's river system and try to edge them out, but you only get 2 huts for the entire game. So the chances are, if you connect to their river system, you're just both going to score it unless you somehow get both of your huts connected into their river system, which would be a waste of your second hut anyway. Just put it somewhere else and get some additional points. So that is sort of the other new fun thing of Hunters and Gatherers. I will say that the art on this one is different than your traditional Carcassonne art, and I think that is where I will throw it over to you to talk about some Carcassonne Hunters and Gatherers.
Wow. So I get to do the art thing?
Do you not like the art?
It's fine.
I like the art a lot.
You like the art a lot? Okay,
Yeah.
I think the cover is pretty rough. The cover of the box is pretty rough.
I like it.
Actually, it kind of reminds me of like a Where the Wild Things Are kind of look.
I will say that we are talking about the 2002 printing of this. There was a
Right.
Z-Man printing that came out, I want to say in 2015.
Was it that recent?
It was more recent than I expected it to be, and that looks a lot like the Safari cover did, where
Yeah.
it is a different art style than the tiles entirely.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the older version, and I actually like the cover. I think it's a little bit more, I don't want to say drawn, because obviously all the art in Carcassonne is drawn.
It's less
not
realistic.
photographic.
It's more cartoony.
I just think it looks a little bit more sketched,
Okay.
which I enjoy.
Huh. No, I'll agree. Component-wise, it's exactly like every other Carcassonne game. You get tiles, you get huts, you get wooden meeple things, and it's fine. I will say, I feel like this might be one of the best spin-offs that there is, and it's kind of a bummer. Like we've talked about with The City in the past, that this is one that was kind of a one and done, and maybe, printed a second time, this Z-Man edition that you were talking about. But it sucks because there's a lot of really great mechanics in this one, and I feel like it's worth having in the collection as a step up from base Carcassonne. Carcassonne kind of thing. I love what they did with the kind of escalation of the rivers being not just tiles, but also fish. I love the way that the kind of animal thing works out, because we've seen that in other games where you have like an animal that eats another kind of animal and you're scoring animals for your farmers. I think that was Safari, when you lay somebody down in a field and they earn points for how many animals are in that field.
I think Amazonas gave you points for
that's what it
animals
was.
in
It
a
was-
forest.
yeah.
Safari was you were making the little circles of animals with the additional tiles.
Right. It all kind of just tiles together after a while in the Carcazone.
Well, that's what I'm kind of wondering. Are you finding this one to be super excellent because it's the first Carcassonne we've played in a while, or is it excellent because you like it?
No, I think it's got some really, really strong things in it. I feel like it cuts out a lot of extra stuff. One thing that I really love about this one is that it incorporates bonus tiles in a really smooth and elegant way. Something that came up a lot when we were talking about this. When you get playing Carcassonne long enough, you draw a tile at the end of your turn rather than the beginning of your turn, so you can spend everybody else's play thinking about what you want to do. And when the Carcassonne expansion Traders and Builders came along, it's pretty much you can no longer do that, because if somebody uses their builder, they get to draw another tile out of the base pool, which is cool because you're adding more tiles, you're getting bonuses by doing more stuff, but it kind of threw a snag in the feel of the game because you can't draw at the end of your turn, because once you take that, if the next player, should have earned a bonus tile, they should have had rights to that tile technically by the rule. But it also does a few things that I love about Carcassonne spin-offs in Hunters and Gatherers. The bonus tiles going to the person that completes a feature encourages you to more actively interact with the other players, which is something that I love seeing in Carcassonne expansions, making you kind of police the giant quote-unquote feature that somebody's working on. If somebody's drawing or making a massive forest and or city, but you have the perfect tile to close off that city, sure, they're going to get points for it, but you get that bonus tile, and the bonus tiles give you enough benefit to make it worthwhile for you going after those. Sometimes it's just 4 fish points, or you get a fancy animal, you get the shrine that means that all the tigers the shrine is only you can score in this particular hunting field.
Yeah,
and
that's
obviously,
a mean tile.
and there's a lot of really interesting stuff like that. I think it's a fantastic standalone edition of Carcassonne that I really wish still existed more than just like on the BGG geek market.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier, do you just like this because it's the thing we've played, or do you like this because it's good? And I said that sort of betraying my true feelings, because I do like this quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a really sleek implementation of things that have improved on Carcassonne that we've seen in other games sort of piecemeal, and it brings them all together as one thing. I think this is a nice implementation, and I think it's an easy teach to people who may not be super familiar with Carcassonne. Like, we've played all the Carcassonnes at this point. It's easy to be like, okay, this, not that, this, not that. But if you've only played base Carcassonne, or you never played Carcassonne, I feel like this is a really easy one to transition to. It's not super different, but it's different enough that you won't feel like you're playing the same game, but you should pick it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting in a way to see that this was a 2002 release. So this is 2 years after the original Carcassonne, before they went off on the wild tangent of, 10 years of expansions. So a lot of these ideas, we see them crop up in later Carcassonnes in different ways, and I'm just like, I wish that we just got to have this nice thing again, which is how I feel about the city as well. And the more and more that we have played these Carcassonnes and played all the different expansions and variants and all this stuff, the more I find myself kind of wishing that, or kind of preferring to play a standalone Carcassonne game rather than Carcassonne with little expansions added in here and there. Like, realistically, at this point, I would rather play Hunters and Gatherers or the City than base Carcassonne with inns and traders and like the first 2 expansions added in there. I just feel like it's a more concise, focused version of Carcassonne with more than just the base.
Yeah, I won't agree with you that the city is concise and focused. It's certainly your favorite, I know that, but it is a little bit more out there and a little unwieldy to my liking.
Okay.
But I can understand why you would say Hunters and Gatherers is that same sort of feel as base with the first 2 expansions, which at this point when we talk about base Carcassonne, we are almost always talking about base Carcassonne with the first 2 expansions, because that's really the only way we play it. But I can see why you would feel that they are similar, and I agree with you that Hunters and Gatherers just does it as a game that was originally construed together. Like, they made Hunters and Gatherers as one thing. They didn't make Carcassonne, and then the first expansion for Carcassonne, and then the second expansion for Carcassonne as one thing.
Yeah.
It is bolting on as opposed to building something new that is the right shape.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, really, kind of what I got to look back on over almost 2 years of Carcassonne now is there's been a lot of Carcassones, and I feel like, honestly, the best spin-offs were the first few. Hunters and Gatherers and City were both really early on in the Carcassonne era.
When was Castle? Castle's one of my favorites.
Castle's pretty early as well, but then you go into like the Around the World with the Amazonas and the Gold Rush and all of the, what is it, Safari, and the ones that I kind of just forget about. South Seas was like mid-2000s.
South Seas was trash.
Yeah, the Discovery is in that era.
I like Discovery well
was
enough.
Fine, but it is a bummer that a lot of these old Carcassones are kind of just lost to time.
Well, I think there's a little bit of hope coming in, too, because you say Safari is forgettable, but when Safari came out, I remember being very excited. Like, it was better than I thought it was going to be based on the ones that had come before it.
Yeah.
And, like, Gold Rush was good. We liked Gold Rush.
Yeah. And
so
Expansion 10, Under the Big Top, is one of our favorites to
God,
this day.
that's so depressing.
It is, but
it is
the
one of your
expansion is very
favorites.
good. Mechanically.
Yeah, I know. That game is just sad.
Okay.
But there are some good ones that are coming out, but I agree with you. Like, the bulk of the good ones are the first ones. But maybe, like, in the 20 years that was mediocre Carcassonne, they've gotten their enthusiasm back up. And the new Carcassones that will come out if we get another one after Safari, which I assume we will.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't expect Safari, and then there it was. And,
surprise.
Got to be more Carcassonne.
Well, if and when there is more Carcassonne, I'm sure we will cover it in the Carcassonne. And here we are, 20 years after the original release of Carcassonne, 2020, and who knows what will come in the future, blah, blah, blah.
Well, from us, the
More
mini
platitudes.
expansions will come in the future.
I guess that's true. I feel like we should really try to do a Carcassonne event this year at Geekway. You want to maybe off podcast think about actually doing that?
I'm absolutely not going to commit to that on recording.
Carcassonne live. Someday. Probably. Somewhere. Maybe.
Okay, moving on.
Time for a word from our sponsors.
Jake, do you like deck builders?
They're fine, but I'm getting bored of building decks for deck's sake. I need something more in my deck builder to really get me excited.
How about a board of hex tiles that you fly your pirate spaceship around, purchasing new cards from different sectors?
That sounds right up my alley for sure, but could I also get some ship-to-ship combat and competing for influence in each sector in an ever-increasing race for better positioning?
I think you'll find exactly that in Tortuga 21.99 on Kickstarter now from Grey Fox Games.
I bet they'll even include upgraded player tokens and a 5th player expansion to this Kickstarter. How long do I have to check it out?
Tortuga 21.99 is live until February 13th, so you've got a few weeks to check it out.
All right, sounds like a plan. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. In space. Space pirates. As is tradition, at the early part of the year, we will review a Wolfgang Warsch game that we picked up at PAX Unplugged that was published by North Star Games. And I feel bad because I feel like I just stole a whole lot of the intro to the Taverns of Tiefenthal. Danielle, can you repeat some of the words I just said, but make it sound good?
Sure, the Taverns of Tiefenthal are a 20... No, they're not multiple taverns. The Taverns of Tiefenthal is a 2019 release from North Star Games, which plays 2 to 4 players in about 60 minutes. The designer is Wolfgang Warsch, and the artist is Dennis Lohausen. This is a game of deck building, dice drafting, and firing that dog so you can hire a real human server.
Ah, yes, dog. Man's best friend, man's worst server.
Yeah, I mean, how do they carry the mugs?
I would not trust a dog to bring me a beer. I mean, well, no, St. Bernard's is kind of their whole deal, is like they bring you the pouch around the neck, the little barrel.
Do you often
liquor.
receive your tavern drinks in like a cask tied to a St. Bernard?
Okay, well, you said cask. Yes. St. Bernard, no, not so much that part, but I do drink a lot of cask ales.
That dog is also not a St. Bernard.
Is
for
it?
sure.
What kind of dog is it?
It's just a brown dog.
It's just a big brown dog. Yeah. Oh, you mean in the game?
Yeah.
Okay. We've really gone off the rails here, and I would like to tell you about how to play the Taverns of Tiefenthal at this time. I'm only going to tell you how to play the base game because this game does come with 4 additional modules that will come up during the explanation of the game.
Sure.
So, at its heart, the Taverns of Tiefenthal is a deck building game. You are going to have a deck of cards that signifies the patrons coming into your bar and also the staff that you have available to you. Each round of the game, there are 8 rounds total in the game. You're going to draw cards off of your deck and you're going to place them into different sections of this tavern board you have in front of you. It's modular with a whole bunch of different sections that we'll talk about as we go on, but basically you have tables up at the top where your patrons are going to sit. You have a brewer in the bottom corner, which is where any brewer cards you have will produce beer. You have a spot for server cards to go. You have spots for additional tables, and also, spots for some other cards like dishwashers or barbacks, stuff like that. Basically, you're going to continue drawing cards and placing them onto your tavern board until you fill up all of your tables, and then you are done. And then you will be sad that you do not get more cards, but you will deal with it because it is a deck builder. And in this turn of the game, you get to purchase additional cards to go into your deck to maybe have a better turn next time. So after you do all of that card placement, everybody's going to roll some dice, and you're going to take turns drafting those dice. The dice are going to be used to activate the different patrons and different staff of your bar. For example, the patrons that are coming in will generally have a die value that they need, which is basically serving them the right drink, and they're going to give you money back. There are also there's also dice that will produce beer for you with your brewer cards. A 1 or a 6 will produce however many beers you have per the number of the number of brewers you have available there. You can also use other dice in various places on your board, depending on the spaces. And generally, there's spaces that can accept anything. There's a space that for the monk track that can only accept 5s for some reason. They picked 5s for that one. And there's a bunch of other different spaces that will come up depending on other cards you get. Through all of that dice placement, you're going to be gaining 2 kinds of currency. Money, which you will use to hire, quote-unquote, purchase cards into your deck that are additional staff, and also beer, which you'll use to bring in additional patron cards into your deck. What's exciting about this deck building, as opposed to a lot of deck builders, is that the cards you buy don't go into your discard pile, but instead go on top of your draw deck. So anything you purchase is guaranteed to come up the next turn. Asterisk. It's possible that it doesn't, but for the most part, everything is going to come up next turn. You're going to continue going on and on each round of the game, and you're going to be increasing your score by getting more valuable crew and getting more valuable patrons into your deck, because most of your cards are going to have point values associated with them. And you can also spend big amounts of money to upgrade different parts of your shop, maybe adding an additional table permanently, increasing your brewer permanently, turning your dog into a server that is able to actually serve things. Anytime you do one of those, you're going to get a card that is a noble card that is worth 10 points. It goes into your deck as just another card, which can be good or bad depending on how you want to gum up your deck with certain stuff. But at the end of the game, after all those rounds, you're going to take your deck and find all the point cards in it and hope that you have enough. A lot of them will probably be nobles because you probably did a lot of upgrading. And if you didn't, you're probably not scoring the highest. So yeah, that is on the surface how you play Taverns of Tiefenthal.
Can you just give me a quick rundown of what the other modules do?
Sure.
I know we played with almost all of them. But...
So let's see. The first module adds in performers and schnapps. Schnapps is just a little kind of a bonus token you get to spend here and there that you'll earn throughout the game, and to activate the performers, which will do different fun ways of manipulating stuff that you do. There's a reputation track that you get by flipping over your bartender station at the bottom. Basically just another track that you're going to be moving a token around that will earn you additional schnapps, additional points, additional cards, so on and so forth. There's a signatures and guest book module that we didn't get a chance to play with. There's also a module for variable starting setup, so that everybody starts with a little bit of different stuff in their deck, which is also kind of fun. And you can kind of add them all in as you go. Like realistically, you can probably add in the first 2 or 3 modules without any trouble, but it does teach you how to add them in one at a time so you can see what the powers of each of them are and then kind of learn how they're going to interact with other stuff as you go on.
Well, that makes sense. This is a family, well, I wouldn't necessarily say a family weight game, but it is a very lightweight game, so they want to make sure that everybody is getting all the hang of the new modules.
Yeah, and I feel like we're seeing this more and more with stuff that North Star chooses to publish, where you have a game that is a family weight game that has additional modules that you can add in. This is something that we'll probably end up talking about with Oceans, their new Evolutions game that we just got a copy of to look at. How, you have a simple and then you have a complex. Most Wanted did the same thing. Unfortunately, it hid all the fun, complex stuff underneath the box insert, and you had to kind of jostle it around to figure out it was there. By the way, if you have Most Wanted, look under the insert. If you have never looked under the insert because there's a lot more game there. But back to the Taverns of Tiefenthal. I feel like there's a comfortable spot here, a few modules in, where you're kind of like, okay, I've got exactly what I need here. And I will say one thing I love about the production of this is that it's really easy to add in whatever you want because everything is modular. The board that you have that is your tavern board is really interestingly die cut. It makes it easier for you to flip over the parts that you need as you're upgrading different parts of your tavern. The different modules that have different components are just printed on the backs of different sections. Like you'll just flip over your bartender's zone there to get the reputation track. You flip over another tile there to get the signatures track. You can, add flip over the main central board of the time tracker to get the schnapps stuff and some other stuff in there too. So it's fun. It's really well produced in that regard. There's a few things that are kind of annoying. Like I think that the cards could have been printed a little bit clearer, maybe use a little more contrast, because it is kind of hard when you have it all on the table to see all the way across the table of what patrons are available to you, because they all have, like a small number in one corner, a number in another corner, and then a small die at the bottom.
Also very big.
Yeah, it is a table hog for sure.
So you're not going to be able to play this on a small table where you can just sort of lean over and see everything very clearly.
Yeah.
It's not that the cards are necessarily the problem, it's that the game is very large, so you're going to be farther away from them.
Yeah, and that can be a real problem if you do have small tables or just want to, kind of fit onto whatever you can. You're going to have to spread out a good bit, and I'm sure you're just going to have one person that just kind of ends up being the card person that moves all the cards around for everybody, which is going to be true of a lot of these kind of games where you have a whole bunch of different stuff to buy. But how did you feel about the learn of this game? Did you feel like it was easy to learn, easy to pick up what was going on?
Oh yeah, this is a nice light game. It's not a difficult game. And when we added in new modules, it was just like, what do I do? Not, how am I going to figure this into my strategy? It wasn't a difficult thing to add in any of the modules or even multiple modules. I think it was a fine, fun, easy game. This is a very gateway style game, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it teaches deck building in a really easy to understand way, especially because you don't have a massive amount of cards you're going to. Like if you're playing Dominion or Star Realms as your first deck builder, you can get to a point where your deck is just like 50, 60 cards, and you're just like, what in the world do I even do at this point? You're not going through a ton of cards and a whole ton of deck cycling in Taverns of Tiefenthal. You'll go through your entire deck maybe every 2 or 3 rounds, I think is pretty fair. Were you going through faster than that?
I was going through every 1.5 rounds.
Dang. Well, I wish I had drawn better then. But by the end of the game, you're going to have a lot of cards, but you're going to have all of this whole bunch of nobles probably, and it'll be really easy to sort out and see what you got. But I feel like you don't get overloaded with what's in your deck at any time.
No.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think helps that is that when you are upgrading the portions of your tavern, you can discard cards. So while you may be buying cards every round and adding stuff into your deck, you can discard cards of whatever type you're trying to upgrade to get a discount on the upgrade cost. Mm-hmm. So if I'm trying to fire my dog and hire a waitress, I can discard a waitress card to get, I think, a 4 Thaler discount.
Yeah.
On the cost of that upgrade to bring it down to 8 from 12. And that discount is always the cost of the card in general. So sometimes it's just kind of like loaning yourself money later on, and then that card gets removed from your deck. Yeah. And okay, cool, we're out of that, and I now have a permanent server, and I have this noble card, which is going to give me points at the end of the game. So you are thinning your deck down a little bit that way.
Yeah. Another question that I have that I think is worthy of discussion: do you feel like you had different ways to win this game? Did you ever have I'm going to focus just on beer production, I'm going to focus just on money production, I'm going to focus on having a whole ton of tables?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think the way to win this game is to upgrade your bar as much as possible because those nobles are worth so many points. And if you don't do that, you are not going to win this game, I don't think. I don't think we've had a game where somebody just completely neglected that and was able to get anywhere close to winning.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't think you can do exactly the same thing every round because you are drafting dice, and dice are, by their very nature, a little bit random. And what you see will be different depending on what the person in front of you rolls, what the person behind you rolls, what you yourself roll, how many server cards you've had to be able to roll your own dice that people don't have to draft. And I think you can't say, every round you need to make 9 beer and that's going to win you the game, because you may not get dice that let you do that.
Yeah.
That may not be an option. You need to roll with what you get as best you can, But I think other than upgrading your tavern very quickly, there's not really a strategy that is always going to be the same to this game.
I think, and this is something that happened to me in one or two games, there's also a good bit of randomness in the cards that you draw up. I have had a number of times where, the fourth or fifth round, I draw 3 patrons, and that is literally all I had to do. And maybe I don't have, a specific tile that allows me to mitigate or redraw my stuff. And I feel like it's possible to have that kind of like speed bump of a turn in this, which is something that happened to me in Quacks of Quedlinburg as well. If you just have like the worst possible draw of all time, you pull all of your cherry bombs all at once. And I'm wondering, is that something that you ever felt? Did you ever have that kind of speed bump turn?
I mean, I had it. I think part of that is my own fault. I didn't use my counter guests appropriately. There are counter guests that allow you to essentially kick everybody out of your tavern and give it another go with cards that you haven't drawn up, which if you've drawn 3 of your bad guest cards, you haven't called them out of your deck, that means that they won't come up again as long as you're not at the end of your deck. So if you have that counter guest and everybody starts with the counter guest, so you can have it from the very beginning of the game, I think that allows you to move through those turns. I think also the fact that the cards that you're buying go on top of your deck means that you shouldn't be drawing terrible cards only on like your second and continuing turns, because you should have at least bought something on the previous round to give you some kind of advantage. And the more that you can put good cards into your deck, the more those good cards are going to come out immediately.
No, you're 100% right. Like, I feel like when I have had those speed bump turns, it probably was something I did. I just would like a little bit more mitigation in my card draws. If I could have some way to spend something to, even if I always had the option to do some kind of a mulligan. I just feel like I would enjoy that, but I don't know how you would work that in.
I mean, you do, though. Because everybody starts with that counter guess that allows you to kick everybody out.
Well, yeah, but like if I always had an option to mulligan at a significant cost for the luck of a better draw. I don't know. I like that kind of mulligan with any kind of drawing randomness game.
Well, I do like the fact that the performers that you can add into the game, one of them allows you to kick guests out as well if you pick that side of it when you add them into your tavern, because the performers, you decide which of their 2 powers you're going to use for the whole game when you place them, and the other side is not available to you. But one of your performers allows you to kick people out as well. So I think they give you a couple of different ways to get rid of junk, and there are cards that will burn off patrons. It's a weird iconography choice that it is a person on fire, but I mean, it's the terminology for burning somebody from the deck. I think they give you a couple of options on how to not have a junk turn.
Another feature that is kind of befuddling to me, there is a monastery track in this game on the main board, which you just basically, you can spend your 5s to move your token up this track that occasionally will pay off with a card of some kind. And it goes way, way higher than I ever needed. And I found that kind of an interesting inclusion. I kind of feel like it was just like, we have this track to use your extra die, but only if it's a 5. Did you ever really feel like you got a lot out of that?
No,
beyond
I never
a card?
focused on that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I didn't have that to do with my 5s, I would have been kind of bummed, because if you don't have 5s up in your patrons, and there are, I think, some 5 patrons, but they cost quite a few beers, so they would be later in the game that you'd have those, that you'd be generating that much.
Yeah.
So if I don't have a patron that can take a 5, the brewer can't take a 5, the
cash box can and the barback.
They take anything, but they just generate one of their resource, which if you have more than 1 5, that would be kind of a waste.
Yeah.
And especially with the waitress who allows you to roll additional dice, I'd rather have a thing that I can do with dice that I have to take than have to take dice and not have anything that I feel like is giving me any kind of benefit.
Okay.
It's not the greatest track. No, you're not going to win just focusing on that monastery track. Yeah. But if you've got those dice, it's nice to be rewarded in some way for having to place them.
I think what was weird about it to me is that it just felt like this is a track that I put here because there was space on the board. Like,
it wasn't
doesn't really
super
feel
thematic.
like it does anything. It just feels tacked on, and it was kind of just jarring to remember that it was there every now and then. Anytime I see a track, I assume, oh man, I've got to commit resources to this because I got to make sure that I'm the highest on the track. But then I realized
you
2
and
or
I
3 games in,
differently.
2 or 3 games in, I'm looking at it, I'm just like, this track doesn't really mean a whole lot. I might get a bar back or something off of it, and that's nice. But it just like I don't know who's getting up to like the 20 or 25th spot on that track.
I mean, I think assume it's just if you have a game where a lot of 5s are rolled.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe you're rolling a whole ton of 5s, and that's all your entire game.
And I think one of the performers allows you to move up on that as well.
Yeah.
So,
It's a track. It exists. Another question that I have for you, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. Did this game feel any different at any player count?
yeah, but only in the fact that at 2 players, and we did play it at 2 players, the coaster passing felt a little weird because like I'm passing it to you and you're passing it back to me, and we're not actually really passing. You're just sort of keeping a finger on the one that you just took a die from, so that you know that you don't take from that one next time. In every other player account, you were physically passing those coasters, but I don't think the actual gameplay was different. It was just that drafting stage that felt a little bit different. The actual gameplay was fine at 2.
At any player count, did you really concern yourself with what you were passing to other players?
Oh, absolutely.
Really? Okay. Because I never really got to the point where, other than like, I got to make sure I take these 6s because 6s make beers. I never spent any time looking at anybody else's boards, and maybe this is just how I play these kind of drafting games. I'm not ever really too terribly concerned, I guess, with what I pass.
Oh yeah, like if I looked ahead, because you place your cards out before you draft the dice, if I looked ahead and I saw that the next 2 players had brewers out, you better believe I was taking those 6s, whether or not I needed to produce a ton of beer this round, or even if I was going to produce a lot of beer when I took it.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to give it to you and allow you to get that massive amount of influx if you had 2 brewers out on top of your thing. Or if I saw that you had patrons that were going to be 2s and 3s, normally 3s are kind of a crappy die to have because there's nothing that really suits 3s other than the things that give you 1 resource or a patron.
Yeah.
So if I see that you've got 2s and 3s that you're going to be able to use, and I'm not really able to use anything, like maybe it's my 2nd or 3rd pass, and I'm like, okay, none of this is great for me, I'm going to take the 2s and 3s, because otherwise you'd get them and you'd be able to use something that normally wouldn't be able to give you an advantage. I was definitely doing that, and I was looking at what people were going to be passing me when I was taking from my own pool, because if I knew there were 2 1s coming down on the next thing, I don't need to take my one. I can let that one go. Unless you've got a bunch of brewers. If I want to get a 5, for some reason I want to bump up on that monk track, I can look, okay, you rolled 3 5s. I'm going to get a 5. It's fine.
I guess maybe it was just that the drafting stage of this happened so quickly that I never really felt like I spent the time to look at other people's stuff. And again, maybe that's just me. That's how I play drafting games. I just kind of look at which of these options is the one that I want. What works best for the situation I'm currently in, rather than, do I need to take this to stop somebody else from having an advantage? But again,
no, I know that's not entirely true. I've played Terraforming Mars with you recently.
I don't look at your cards that much. But yeah, like, it's interesting because I feel like that moved quickly enough that I didn't need to concern myself with the drafting a whole lot. And it didn't feel any different at any player count. Even at 2 player, it just felt like, well, I got somebody rolled the exact same dice as me, is kind of how it felt. It never felt like it was any different, which is good, I guess. But at the same, I'd like for it to be slightly different. I'd like for a little more interaction in that regard. Not in the drafting, but I would just like for there to be more interaction that would matter in some way. Like Quacks of Quedlinburg. I hate to continually go back to Quacks, but I feel like
the only one who's doing it.
And they're the same designer from the same studio, released at the same time of year, that have a drawing out of a random pool component. They're fundamentally similar starting points that go in a lot of different ways. But Quacks Quedlinburg has a lot of things that rely on your opponent's positions on certain tracks, and that was nice. And it would be cool if there were cards in this that in some way worked in that. Like if you had, an advertiser or something, like a barker outside that would depend on the other, the players to your left and right. Maybe that's the expansion at some point. Some kind of, adjacency rules or something I would like to see in this game, just to give it a little more interactivity.
So you didn't pay attention to the dice that were being passed to you, but you'd like the game to have more interactivity?
That's a mean pull, but you know what I mean? I want to have game mechanics that encourage me to interact rather than just the concept of drafting to interact. You know what I mean?
I mean, I know what you mean. I just don't necessarily agree with you. I feel like the level of interaction that the drafting adds to this game is as much interaction as I'd care to have in this game. Like, I can control a little bit of what I'm giving to other people and anticipate a little bit of what they're giving to me. But beyond that, other than somebody taking a card that I may want, it's entirely up to me what happens to my tavern, and I like that better.
Fair enough. Well, what do you think the longevity of this one is? Is this going to continue to come out a lot for us this year?
I think it will for two main reasons. One is that we play games with a lot of people who are new to the games that we are teaching them. And I think this is a really good game for that because you can adjust the difficulty of the game. And it doesn't go terribly difficult, but you can make it more complex by adding in those modules. Mm-hmm. You could play it with the base game. It's very simple at that point. It is a family weight game at that point. If not a family themed game. But... It is a family weight game at that point. But if you add in 2 or 3 of the modules, you've got enough plates spinning that it does require you to pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah, enough levers to tweak.
Still a fairly light game, but it is a fun game, and it gives you enough things to think about at that point. And also, just because I think it is an enjoyable light game. It's the same thing I was talking about with Azul Summer Pavilion. It's the kind of game that you want to play. Like, it'll come out to the table because it's just a fun thing to play. Like, it's not going to be the game that I think about and I am really satisfied as a gamer by playing it. It is not going to be my telos at game night, but it is a game it's a fun way to kill 30 minutes. And this is 60 minutes. This is not a 60-minute game. Unless you have somebody who doesn't understand what dice are and which ones they want. This is a 30 to 45-minute game. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a fun thing to do. I think the setup is a little bit of a bear. But once you've got it down, like, we've got it bagged out pretty nicely. Here are the things that you get. Take everything out of your bag, put it together. Somebody has to put out the trade rows of cards. I think it's the kind of thing that once people in our group are comfortable with it, it'll be easy to pull out and just be like, hey, let's play this. It'll be fun. Everybody will be happy. Nobody's going to be like, oh, this is the worst. Like a certain game that I have a feeling we're going to talk about next episode has had the effect of.
I am kind of torn on Taverns. I enjoy it. I enjoy playing it. I think it's well designed. You know, obviously there's a few things that I can nitpick here and there, but it is a fun 45-minute kind of game. You have deck building. You have, you know, that kind of dice drafting. You get some placement. You get to kind of play around with your little modular tavern. But I hate to say this game is always going to be overshadowed by the Quacks of Quedlinburg for me. Like I said, same designer, same publisher, similar kind of you are buying things to add to your random pool. Obviously, there are a lot of pieces in the middle in terms of how you use those things, but I really enjoy the excitement of push your luck off of that building component in Quacks more than I do drawing cards to fill out my tavern in Taverns of Tiefenthal. And that's kind of where it's always going to be. I'm sure we're going to play Taverns sometimes here and there, but I can just look back over the last year or so at how frequently Quacks has come out, especially now that we have the expansion. It's been a perennial game, and I don't feel like Taverns has that kind of hook that makes me want to bring it back to the table again and again. So, good, very good, and I am all about a beer-themed game. And that was a Blues Traveler joke.
Traveler reference.
But that's kind of where I'm landing on the Taverns of Tiefenthal. Who knows? Maybe we get to the end of the year and we did play it another dozen times. But for me, I'd rather go drawing out of a bag, especially now we put coin capsules on all of our stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a difference in you and I as game players. I don't terribly like Push Your Luck. Mm-hmm. I like Quacks of Quedlinburg quite a lot, but it is the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling it's not surprising that you are more inclined to play Quacks, and I'm sort of in the middle. I'll play either one.
Well, there it is, the Taverns of Tiefenthal. You can share your thoughts on the internet at draftmechanic.net. Actually, no, that's just a website, and it goes the one way, but you can go into our guild or our Slack channel and share your thoughts there as well. But as we do, and it's been a minute since we've done one of these, it's time for us to share some beer pairings because we are putting the Taverns of Tiefenthal on tap after this bump music. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. All right, Danielle, it is time to do an on tap. We've got the Taverns of Tiefenthal, the 2019 release from North Star Games that plays 2 to 4 players in about 45 minutes. Designed by Wolfgang Warsch with art by Dennis Lohausen. This is a game of deck building, dice drafting, and firing that dog to hire a real human server. Danielle, what are the rules of the on tap?
I pick a couple of beers that I think go thematically with the game that we talk about, and then you and I both tell the nice people about them.
Yeah, I figured it was important for us to mention that because we didn't have an on tap the last 2 episodes
That's
because
fair.
we had convention, we had year-end recap, we had winter break.
I guess there are actually some more rules than of the on tap. Normally, I try to pick beers that are fairly regularly available, whether they are seasonally or year-round available. They're not going to be one-offs. I'm not going to pick the beer that was made once for the festival that you didn't go to 4 years ago. That's not helpful. Nobody wants that.
No, we'll save those for our year-end recaps and we talk about cans of beer that we'll never see again.
I also try to pick beers that are rated on the Untapped app at 3.5 or above. I think there's only been one beer that was on there that I was absolutely against the rating, and I put it on even though it was rated lower than that. But anything else is going to be 3.5 or above because I don't want to recommend bad beer to you. That would be dumb.
That's not what we're here to do. We're here to recommend good beers. Danielle, will you recommend a good beer?
Well, first I'll finish the thing I was going to say, which
Oh,
is
crap.
that after we go through all of this, if you are wanting to have more information on these beers, the lists are always available on my Untapped, which is left too easily, as I am almost anywhere. Obviously, I will put them in the show notes as well, but if you're trying to get a real quick group of Untaps, if you go to my Untapped profile, I put them as public as soon as the episodes go live, so you can always reach them there.
All right, Danielle. It's
Now
time.
I will say the first beer, which is from Ale Works Brewing Company in Williamsburg, Virginia, and it is Tavern Brown Ale.
Easy.
It's an American brown ale, which is 5.7% ABV, and it is an American brown ale that is brewed with 6 malt varieties, English yeast, and floral American hops. It is an approachable yet complex brown ale, and it is sold in 12-ounce bottles.
Up next from 3 Taverns Brewery in Decatur, Georgia, we have Rowdy and Proud. It's an American IPA, 6% ABV, 26 IBU. This is an IPA brewed with hula melon, mosaic, and amarillo hops, and it has low bitterness and strong melon and fruit flavors. Technically, this was brewed for their soccer team, but shh,
I mean,
don't tell.
tavern patrons are definitely rowdy and proud.
Rowdy. These are available in 12-ounce cans, and they do exist right now because I did see them in Georgia a few days ago.
I was going to say, this is the most appropriate 3 Taverns beer, but if you are just looking for a brewery that fits the theme,
Yo.
3 Taverns is real good.
So good.
Next up, we have from Smutty Nose Brewing Company in Hampton, New Hampshire, Old Brown Dog. As I told you, it's not a St. Bernard, it's just a brown dog.
Oh.
It's an American brown ale, just like the last one I talked about was. It's 6.5% ABV and 30 IBU. This was actually first brewed in 1988, so it is a classic American brown lager.
Ooh,
So it is a classic American brown ale.
Ooh, this sentence is just for me.
This sentence is included just for Jake. It is
Yay.
well paired with grilled meats, especially sausages, ribs, and steak.
I like all those things.
I know, that's why it said just for you.
Aw.
This is available in 12-ounce cans, and I mean, Smutty Nose Old Brown Dog is one of those beers that, like, if you've had the classics of American craft beer, this is one of those that you should have had.
Now I'm thinking about foods I would like to eat.
Cool. Talk about this next beer so I can talk about this weird picture.
I would love to tell you one of my favorite brewery names in the entire world, and that is Hop Butcher for the World in Darien, Illinois. Their beer is called Tavern Cut. It is an Imperial IPA, 7.5% ABV, and this double IPA is brewed with Citra and Vic Secret hops for orange, grapefruit, and tropical flavors. And Danielle, explain this picture to me.
It appears to be a piece of square pizza with
Yeah.
a mustache
Mustache.
holding up a beer.
And it's got pepperonis on him because that's how he's a pizza.
I was going to say, that's how I can tell he's a pizza.
Huh.
I don't know why that's the picture for Tavern Cut.
Maybe that's the style of pizza? That's a Tavern Cut pizza?
Maybe.
Maybe.
But why does the pizza have a mustache?
Well, because he's, old-timey. All old-timey things have mustaches. Taverns are old-timey.
Fair enough.
Somebody out there, please explain to us this beer label. Tavern Cut from Hop Butcher for the World.
Although I suppose I don't get to call out things for being weird, because the final beer on our Untap is on here strictly because I have no other game that I can imagine ever being able to use it for.
Yeah.
And it is called Purple Monkey Dishwasher from Evil Genius Beer Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Because dishwashers are one of the people that you can hire onto your staff in the Taverns of Tiefenthal. And there's not a lot of dishwasher-themed games. This is a porter that is 6.7% ABV, 35 IBU, and it is a chocolate peanut butter porter, which is sold in 12-ounce bottles. Evil Genius Beer Company is one of those breweries that is always doing weird adjuncts, and this one is one that turns out very delicious. I like it quite a bit.
Wacky. So, for more information on those beers and any ones from previous episodes, you can go to the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. And if you can't remember that, you can go to boardgames.beer, which is an actual website I pay real human money to own. Boardgames.beer. That is literally a thing you can type into your search bar. Yeah. So, it is time for Danielle to regale us once again with the tale of hop. Which
Yes.
hop will you be featuring today and why?
We are continuing our hop primer series, and this week we are going to be talking about Strata hops. And the why is actually kind of funny. We were up at the Burial Beer Co. in Raleigh, I want to say a week and a half ago. The same weekend as Whose Turn Is It Anyway? And we were stopping into their birthday event up at that Raleigh location. And I was talking to Doug, who is the owner, or one of the owners. He and his wife, Jess, and their original head brewer, Tim, are the owners of Burial Beer Co. And I had said to him that I was doing this hop primer series, and I had done some pretty standard hops. And I was like, what is the hop that you would want people to know about? Because you guys make amazing beer. What is the hop that is exciting to you? And then Doug proceeded to give me a list of about 5 or 6 different hops. And one of them was Strata. So I figured this was an interesting place to start because it had kind of a cool story about it.
I see that there are some facts involved.
Yes. Fact 1. Oregon State University has had a hop breeding program since 1893.
Whoa.
It's a very old program. Fact 2. In the end of the aughts, it was kind of struggling for funding because everybody was struggling for funding in the end of the aughts.
Now, do you mean the end of the aughts, 2000 aughts? Or
Yeah, I just realized, in the 2008-2009 time period,
Gotcha.
when everybody had no money,
Yes.
they also had no money.
Oh, okay. So here.
Enter a company called Indie Hops. In 2010, they partnered with the program by donating $1 million to create new aroma varietals. Just before this donation in 2009, Sean Towson, the director of the hop breeding program at Oregon State, had an open pollination pearl hop that he wanted to develop. Pearl hops are a German hop. And the next year, he gets this $1 million donation, and now he has the money to set up a field nursery for the seedlings of the hop that he was currently calling X331. Now, plants don't just magically poof into their best form, so it took him a while to get everything set on that. By 2015, the program had selected the most promising genotype of hop, and they were able to plant a 9-acre test plot, which yielded surprisingly well, better than anybody had expected. By 2017, the hop is still not on the market, but some breweries are getting shipments to test, including, unsurprisingly, Worthy Brewing Company, which is owned by one of the owners of Indie Hop, the people who gave Oregon State University the $1 million back in 2010. They submit a pilot batch of their beer that's brewed with Strata hops to the Basecamp Brewing Proto Hop Brew Fest in Portland. Basecamp being a brewery, or
I've been there.
Basecamp closed, didn't they?
No, that was the Commons closed. Basecamp's
Okay.
still around. They make a s'mores porter.
True fact. So they submit this Strata beer to the Basecamp Brewing Proto Hop Beer Fest, and it wins Best in Show in 2013. They also submitted their Strata IPA to a state convention, and it won first place in 2017. Strata hops are finally available on the market in 2018, and it is the first hop that is commercially available from the Indie Hop Oregon State Partnership. It's patented, so it's kind of hard if you are a home hop grower to grow your own, but it is now available on the market for breweries to use. Has been for about a year and a half, I think, at this point. It has a flavor that is described in an actual article that I read as passion fruit meets pot, bringing in layered notes of tropical fruit, including mango, passion fruit, melon, berries, some citrus, and most of the citrus flavor is grapefruity. You're not getting like a real citrus flavor, like a bright citrus flavor like you would from something like Citra like that. Along with that comes some dank herbal notes that you would get from cannabis flavors or any of those dank hops, hence the passion fruit meets pot. It also has a little bit less of the Dizzle catty bite of the hops that are really dank usually. Like those hops have a nice dank flavor, but they also have a little bit of, when they say catty, they don't mean mean, they mean that sort of weird cat piss smell.
Yeah.
And it has less of that, which
Good.
Lots of people, I mean, in a lot of like fermented beverages, that is a thing that people look for as a characteristic, but this has less of it, and that was a desirable characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
All of the beers that have been brewing this are sort of in the still experimentation stage because it is so new to the market, but it is being used as a dual purpose hop. When you use it for bittering, it has a nice balanced bitterness. When you use it for flavor or aroma, it brings out the fruity and tropical side and that berry note that I had talked about earlier. It has also been reported that if you use it for dry hopping, that deepens the grapefruit and dank qualities. So you can really, depending on how you add it in for that flavoring, you can get different flavors to be accentuated. At this point, it has mostly been used in IPAs, pales, and session IPAs. So, I mean, at this point, it is mostly for hop-forward beers. Strata also stands fairly uniquely among the hops from Oregon because it is more reminiscent of the hops that are being grown in Washington and Idaho, which have been more popular lately because they are somewhat more bold and assertive, as opposed to the Oregon hops, which are closer to European hops. Like I said, this was originally grown from Pearl German hops. But because Strata has so many complex flavors and it is really punchy, it is more in competition with those Washington and Idaho hops than the Oregon hops, which is what is allowing it to become so popular. If you're looking for a beer that is brewed entirely with Strata hops, Strata IPA from Worthy Brewing Company is still sort of the standard that I was able to find that's mostly available. I will say the beer that I am drinking as we record tonight, the Finite Spectrum of Existence, which I brought the can because there was no way I was going to remember that, does have Strata hops in it. It is a triple IPA from the aforementioned Burial Beer Co. Mm-hmm. Doug doesn't lie. He likes that hop. He puts it in his beer.
It all came full circle here.
And it is delicious.
Yes.
So I'm excited that this is a hop that is fairly new to the market and is exciting the people who make the beer that I absolutely love. So I wanted to share it with you guys.
New, exciting.
Check out for Strata hops.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm sure you'll put some information in the show notes as you do.
Always
link or two. And yeah, no, I don't have anything else to say. This segment is concluded. Time to go to the final round. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com. As we move into the final round, I do want to take a quick minute to talk about our last 2 weekends as we went to some conventions. We went to Whose Turn Is It Anyway and had a fantastic time. Got a chance to meet a bunch of listeners. We played Carcassonne Hunters and Gatherers with a few listeners from the show, which was totally tons of fun, and just met up a bunch of people. Totally recommend everybody, once again, go to your local conventions. They are so great.
I was going to say Dizzle and Isle of Cats as well.
Yeah. And the other thing that was kind of interesting about Whose Turn Is It Anyway is we had the flea market where we, able to sell off a bunch of games. And we're getting to that point where we really need to be doing this a lot. And I think we're really looking forward to that flea market, which is kind of what I wanted to make this next final round question about. I am interested, and we'll put this up in the guild. We'll put this up in the Slack channel and all the places that we usually put these things, unless I forget. And then listener Peter will put it in the Slack for me. Thank you so much for doing that last time, Peter.
Don't put this on Peter.
No, this is entirely on me, and I will do it before the end of this episode airs. But I want to know, what are your requirements for culling or managing your collection? When do you decide it's time for you to cull? What method do you like to go to get games out of your collection? And what is your kind of size that you want to keep your collection at? Because we're at the point where we're just like, well, we're out of shelves and we're out of floor that we use after we're out of shelves. It's time for us to cull. This is what it is, being a podcast about board games for 4.5 years. So that is the question, or that I will pose to everybody. The other thing, we went to Tantrum Con kind of on a last-minute thing this last weekend down in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We did some demoing for Elf Creek Games. That was absolutely fantastic. So if anybody came by and learned Atlantis Rising and is now playing Atlantis Rising
is a cooperative worker placement game where you're trying to save the people of Atlantis before their island sinks into the sea.
Yes. Danielle, that was your first time working a booth. How did it feel?
It felt like it was a cooperative worker placement game. I got that spiel down real tight by the end of the con, but it's a pretty chill con as far as cons go. It is mostly a playing convention, and it is still fairly small in the local category. So there were not the absolute crush that you get even at something like PAX U. You probably had a lot of more people walking by that booth. So like it was fine. It was just me hanging out with Mike because you were doing the actual demoing of the games. I was doing the spiel and administrative management. So
I have now played Atlantis Rising enough to do up my own 6-pack of it. So be
you better
ready.
have
Be
played
ready
it
to see that
enough
soon.
to teach me because I've still played it no times.
Well, we will be playing Atlantis Rising, a cooperative worker placement game, very soon.
We're trying to save the people of Atlantis before their island sinks into the sea.
Yes, you're going to build some components, and we'll move on and talk about that probably next episode or the episode after. But in this episode, we are talking about the final round topic. What is your favorite cheese to go on a cheesesteak? No, that wasn't it. But that was an entire thread on the guild. So thank you all so much for joining in. I think we can all agree that all cheese is good.
No, Michael doesn't like cheese.
I think most of us can agree that all cheese is good.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Michael, but I love cheese a lot. I'll take any cheese that you don't want. Just hand it to me.
That's
as long
weird.
as it's good cheese. I'm moving on. So really, what the real final round question was, what do you look for in a gaming convention? What are your convention must-haves? Do you prefer a little one, a big one, a vendor hall? Do you require alcohol to be consumed at your convention center? These are the questions that I ask of you. So I will start out the list. And here it is. Eric Buscemi from the Cardboard Horde leads us off with, it's not an absolute must-have, but I strongly prefer conventions that have 24-hour gaming, or at least places that have well-known after-hours locations where late gaming happens. How do you feel about that? Do you want 24-hour gaming? Or do you want just late gaming?
I almost never want 24-hour anything, other than maybe coffee.
Or chicken cheddar biscuits from Time Out in Chapel Hill?
It's not really a requirement. But I do like conventions that have a well-determined after-hours gaming spot.
Yeah.
For the first couple of years we went to Gen Con, and I use the word couple generously, for the first 5 almost years we went to Gen Con, there wasn't really a place that was comfortable to go out and play games after the hall closed. I mean, you could get some space in that big room that was in the convention center, but it wasn't terribly comfortable, and you never knew who had that space reserved or for what. It wasn't really close to anything.
It was so loud.
It was also very, very loud because there were no soft surfaces anywhere in that room. Whereas the last 2 years, there has been that ballroom that was in the JW Marriott that does have nice soft surfaces because it is a carpeted room and it has nice upholstered chairs. And we could go there, and there were always folks that we knew that we could find to play games. There was space to play games. It felt still part of the convention because it was busy and buzzing, but it didn't feel overwhelming and it didn't feel uncomfortable. So I like that there was that option. When we were at Tantrum Con, there were people playing in the play hall late into the night, well later than we stayed up.
Whose Turn had 2 and 3 a.m. gaming, which was really cool.
They did. And even up until, like, I think midnight on the Sunday.
Midnight on Sunday. Insane.
So that was nice. It didn't bum me out that they closed at 2 a.m. because at 2 a.m. I probably shouldn't be starting anything I don't know how to play anyway.
Yeah.
Very few good gaming experiences have come when you're learning a new complex game at 2 in the morning. At least for me personally, and I know from your stories for you as well.
Don't play a Teotihuacan that late.
Or Altiplano, or
Underwater Cities at 4 a.m.
Yeah, so as long as you have a reasonable amount of after-hours gaming for your convention hall, and it is in a centralized location that people know about and that is not an unpleasant room to be in, I'm happy. Doesn't have to be 24, but I think that's also what Eric is getting at when he's talking about well-known after-hours.
All right.
Peter says, a well-stocked game library, plenty of table space, and a diverse group of people to play with. I'm also a fan of multiple food options within walking distance and 24-hour hall access. While I don't game until dawn anymore, I don't like having to cut a game short because the room is closing. I just want the option to start a game of Terraforming Mars at 11 p.m. if I feel up to it. Which is fine. I think that's about as late as you should start a game of Terraforming Mars.
And it's all those very important words at the end. If I feel up to it. I'm an old boy now.
But the other things that he's talking about I really like. Plenty of table space is obviously a must-have. Food options is a must-have because I know we both reach points at for a convention where it's like, I need to step out of the space for a minute, go get something to eat. My body will feel better because I've put something that is not trash into it, hopefully. And my mind will feel better because it got a second to have normal human interactions, not con interactions.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the things that made me most like PAX Unplugged. Like
Yeah.
the Reading Market was right across, like literally right across the street. And while it was a jam-packed, super busy place, it was super busy in a way that I'm used to.
It's a normal kind of busy.
Yeah, like-
you expect it to be busy, not
Yeah.
just like people on me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, although Saturday afternoon it was people on me.
Origins is a very
I
similar
got
way
deli.
because they've got the North Street Market or something like that, and very similar kind of open market, lots of food options. I really, really like both of those things.
Yeah, this is something that Gen Con also doesn't do fabulously.
Yeah, you can
'Cause-
go to the food trucks and stand in line for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, and there are a couple of restaurants around there, but they do feel like they are swallowed up in the convention.
Yeah. Next up, Paul Imboden succinctly says, harassment policies, food trucks, and open gaming.
That first one is absolutely key. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to have a code of conduct, and that was one of the things that Whose Turn just implemented this year, and they made a point to say, like, they had previously had sort of a bullet point outline, but they had an official code of conduct this year, just because they'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, which...
Yeah.
100%. If you're not putting that thought into your convention, what are you doing?
Yep.
BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, ample table space, abundant water stations, good lighting, convenient food. If the con provides all of that, I'll be a happy gamer. Bonus, some kind of fun meetup, like battling gladiators at the strike tourney in the old spaghetti factory, which is something we do every year at Gen Con. So here I'm not trashing on Gen Con, nor is BJ.
Yes.
That is a fun event, which is run by Rolling Dice and Taking Names, that we look forward to every year.
And BJ hit on something else here
Water?
that, we don't often think about, but that's something that is so, so important. Gotta have water. Please give me access to water. Whose Turn did a pretty good job with water. They had, coolers of water at the concession stand always available. I feel like Geekway always does that, or at least in, the kind of the upstairs rooms of the convention center. No, actually, all of their rooms, there's pretty much water everywhere.
Yeah.
Gen Con, impossible. There's water fountains, and they're probably broken. PAX Unplugged, again, water fountains, and they're okay. But I guess that's more of a small to medium convention kind of thing, is having that, tons of water jugs everywhere. Please drink water. Please don't get dehydrated. Yeah. Thirsty. All right. Finally, Patrick Hillier says these words, as he does at the end of each final round. Number 1, an open gaming area that I can meet up with my friends in. At this point, everything else is gravy. Something to do outside of the con is a bonus. Good food, an interesting city, etc. I don't want to just sit in a convention center for 3 to 4 days anymore. I'm becoming less thrilled with the big cons and the hassle of crowds, finding a place to stay, etc. Smaller to mid-sized regional cons with about 500 to 1,500 people are about the right size to provide some decent amenities, but not get overwhelming. I just experienced my first ultra-small weekend con, and it was spectacular. Yeah. Playing games, but not getting overloaded by everything.
Yeah, I mean...
Danielle, are you ready to book housing for Gen Con this weekend?
No.
Oh, no.
I mean, technically, yes, I am ready.
You're technically ready. We are...
Fingers crossed, everyone. Good luck.
Good luck, everybody. And with that, sigh of resignation. It is time for us to bring an end to this episode of Draft Mechanic. Thank you once again for listening. Please find us on the internet, draftmechanic.net or boardgames.beer, an actual website that I pay real human money for. You can find us on social media at Draft Mechanic and Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also send me an email at draftmechanic@gmail.com if that's your kind of thing you like to do.
We've got a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do twice monthly meetups. Next one is going to be tonight, if you're listening to this when the episode first comes out, 2/6 at Good Road Cider Works. And if not, if you happen to miss that one because we put the episode out the same day, the next one is going to be on 2/18, which is a Tuesday at Salud Cerveceria in the Nodon neighborhood.
Ooh. Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. Visit grayfoxgames.com and sign up for the newsletter for the latest. Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Also, don't forget to go onto Kickstarter and check out Tortuga 2199, their game currently on Kickstarter that you can click at and pledge and do all those things. Mm-hmm. I'm done. You got anything left?
As as always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
Alrighty, everybody. Good night, and we will see you in the near future.
Night.
Bye. Draft Mechanic episode 116 was recorded on Wednesday, February 5th, 2020, in front of a live studio cat who was actually very quiet today. Good job, Bonus.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hey out there in podcast land, this is Brian, and I just wanted to invite you to check out my tabletop game review and preview video channel, Cloak and Maple. There, I check out a lot of Kickstarter games, as well as sneak in some fresh reviews of published games. Come and check out all of the bad acting in my attempts to be entertaining in my intros. Stay for a game overview and hear my thoughts of the game at the very end. You can find Cloak and Maple on YouTube at youtube.com/cloakandmaple.
Punchboard Media,
where we all
Bring something
to the table
pull up a chair
at punchboardmedia.com.